willing to open up the bigger, larger picture of our life, to find that there's more than what we see and more than who we think we are, that these teachings and their many different forms are really sent to us. This is one of the aspects I want to touch on this morning. That when you look at all of the great religions and spiritual traditions, they come in the form of a revelation, and oftentimes there is a touch from above, divine beings, saviors, avatars. They are basically transmitting these teachings, and they're designed to bring an evolution within human consciousness so that we can go into a new place within ourselves, within our culture, within our world. And so what these saviors and teachers are doing really is simply showing us our own potential. And there's that story that's told within Sufi circles about the lioness that was giving birth, and she actually dies during the birthing of her cub. And there was a bunch of sheep grazing in the area, and they saw the lioness dead and the cub yelping. And so they had compassion on the little lion cub, and they raised it. And it grew to a huge male lion, but was surrounded by sheep, raised as a sheep, ate grass and bleated like a sheep. And so life was sheepish for this lion. And one day another lion was stalking in the grass looking for lunch and saw all the sheep and began to pounce and chase, and he saw, to his bewilderment, this fully grown male lion bounding out of the way of his charge and bleating like a sheep. And he said, all right, lunch is going to have to wait. And he grabs this male lion by the mane and drags him over to a pond and shows the male lion his face and says, you're not a sheep, look. And so this is what these teachings are designed to do. They're designed to show us ourselves. They're designed to get us out of our programmed, conditioned, self-limiting belief system, where we just follow along. We're very sheepish. And this has some real-world applications. My mind immediately goes to the great journalist Chris Hedges. He wrote for the New York Times. He was the bureau chief in the Middle East during the first Iraq War. A Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He got fired because of his views on the wars, but he's taken up an independent career now. And one of the things that he talks about is how he received a scholarship from when he was very young to go be educated in the elite schools, where all the world leaders are educated. And he speaks very openly about this. He says the public school system where most of us go is a very different kind of education than where he went in the elite schools. They're taught how to manage, how to call the shots, how to order and control. And when we're in our public school upbringing, we're taught how to get in line, follow orders, obey the teacher, don't speak, listen for the bell. In fact, the school system that we were brought up in was modeled after factories and prisons. And so in many ways, we've been institutionalized before we could even think for ourselves. And so we, like that lion, have been brought up very sheepish under a belief system that has made us feel disempowered, waiting to be told what to do. And so within our social upbringing, we have to overcome these hidden enemies or these blockages within our psyche because they are gatekeepers. They are ways of self-limiting that we don't even realize are in operation. And so whenever we feel stressed, like when that lion was about to pounce on the sheep, our sheepish ways come out. And it's hopefully, since you're coming to these teachings, only a matter of time before you're led to that reflective water and you get to see who you really are. And you come out of the swoon of self-limiting. There's another story. There was a frog that lived by the Great Sea. And so his home was literally looking at the ocean. And he too was being chased by a predator. And this frog, in running away, fell into a well. And when he fell into the well, he met another frog that lived in the well. And the frog that lived in the well said to the frog that lived by the great sea, "So where do you live?" He says, "I live by the great sea." He says, is it as big as my well?" So this is where we recognize we've been so cramped and stifled, and we have no idea the view that we can have when we begin to open up, as these teachings are designed to do. They're designed to spark our curiosity, our imagination, our longing for something greater, right? Uh, Again, I'm kind of full of stories this morning, but you know this one well, maybe. Um, Plato wrote The Republic. This was his great layout of the perfect society. And agree with it or not, he did say, a quick aside here, Plato, who was considered the greatest philosopher of the Western world, in fact, it was said by Arthur North Whitehead, or Alfred North Whitehead, who was a great philosopher in his own right. He says the whole of philosophy can be summed up as footnotes to Plato. And so Plato is considered a giant among the philosophers. And it was Plato who considered democracy, and I'm out on a limb here, he considered democracy the second worst form of government, next to tyranny. And the reason why he thought democracy was the second worst form of government next to tyranny is he says you can never get a genuine leader. Because in democracies, the leaders pander to those who hold the most votes. So the voting blocks that have sway within elections want a certain character quality of a leader. And one of my professors in college, my philosophy professor, used to say it in this way. The voting bloc would say, "What do you believe?" And the Democratic leader would say, "What do you want me to believe?" And that's why you see this flip-flopping. And if you look through the years at YouTube videos of key Democratic or leaders of democracy, they're flip-flopping on issues left and right. They never really hold to a stance, right? There's never really what's coming directly from their own authenticity. And so you can't really have a true leadership that way. And Plato saw this also within the way that we are, again, born into this belief system where we sheepishly follow. And he taught it in the allegory of the cave, where he says we are born into this mental slavery, that we don't realize that what we're looking at are really just shadows on the cave wall. Our physical senses are not giving us an accurate picture of reality. And mind you, Plato wasn't just a philosopher and thinking about stuff. Philosophy in the ancient world was a very different animal. It was a way of actually reconnecting to the absolute reality. So philosophy in this sense is really the path of the initiate that opens to the mystery and joins back with the highest state of its own deepest nature. It's enlightenment. And so Plato's view of philosophy was it was the ladder of return. It was the path back home to who you really are as the higher mind. And so he lays this out in the allegory of the cave. We all start out in darkness. We all start out in chains. And these chains are the belief systems that are in large part due to the conditioning of our five physical senses. And he says, what if one day somebody breaks free of their chains? And instead of seeing the shadows on the cave wall, they begin to realize that those shadows were cast by other things that were deep in the unconscious. And you are going beyond those as well, he says, in this long, arduous climb. And that's an idea of an ascent, right, back to the one. And he says you get to a place where you even go past the sun and the stars, because all of that is part of the dream of conditioning. He says, and then you make it to the lip of the cave. And he says, the one who's broken free can't exit the cave right away because the light of the true sun, which he calls the good, it can't be taken in immediately because our eyes have been so conditioned to the darkness. So he says we have to wait a little bit at that threshold to adapt, and then we can go and behold the sun, and we realize reality. And once you realize reality, there's no way that you're going to believe that the shadows are real anymore. And that's what these initiation-based philosophies, spiritualities, and religions are meant to give us. This is that step up in our evolution. So just like we've gone through stages of development, like we've talked about, where you no longer want to play with Fisher-Price toys. You no longer want to play with action figures or video games. You're not really into going to the clubs or, whatever it was that you did when you were a young kid, right? These things begin to just kind of slough off. You outgrow them. They're no longer giving you the charge and the enjoyment that they once did. And so we're also at another lip if we're coming to these teachings. We're at another lip where we are wanting to slough off the things that are no longer fulfilling. And this is why life oftentimes presents us with these experiences that remind us, shock us even, that we're not really safe, settled, or at peace. And we need something more. And that's when the chains can fall off, right? And we can begin to make that ascent. And so that's what we want to talk about this morning, this ascent back into the one, back into the true, the good, and the beautiful. That this is what we're actually calling for. And in fact, Plato, in one of his dialogues, the Symposium, he says it's an erotic ascent. He uses the Greek word eros. And eros can be eroticism seen through the lens of the flesh and the five senses. And we can have erotic passion for the things within the world, the things of the body. But Plato says that's just the beginning. That's a stage of development. And as you mature philosophically and psychologically, you eventually want to shed those attachments and desires to just physicality. He says, and then we might have an erotic experience or a passion for thinking, right? A passion for artistic expression. But that eroticism is also going to exhaust. He says, eventually the eroticism gets completely redirected towards going back to God. And that's why he calls it an erotic ascent. It's a passion. It's a drive. It's just as much of a drive as sexual reproduction, but it's simply being channeled back into the embrace with God. And that's why once you have this taste of the deeper life, it is a passion, it is a drive. What is it, the Pieta of St. Teresa of Avila, where she is sculpted to be in the throes of ecstasy as the angel comes to pierce her heart with the arrow. And if you look, and I don't know if it was Bernini or whoever made the sculpture, but she's having an orgasm. This is what is on her face, this nun. And the arrow, of course, seems to be, indicative of a phallus, but this is all sacralized. So what we feel towards the physical is going to be amplified beyond what we can even imagine when we return to the source. And that's what drives us. It's not this dry, thin-lipped, emotionless path. It is this return to true love, this opening to something that enthralls us, captivates us, and totally possesses us. That's the beauty of this path. And so this is what we were made for. This is what we are yearning for. And when we begin to taste it, as he says in A Course in Miracles, we begin to feel like anything that gets in the way of that is like this delay that we no longer want to tolerate. It just becomes less and less enjoyable. We get this icky feeling like we could actually better serve our own agenda, our own purposes really, if we are to return to the source, because that's what we really want, and now we know clearly that's all there really is. Everything else is a shadow on the wall. So And one of the ways that these teachings have been transmitted as of late, back in the 1960s and 70s, was with this energy intelligence, as he called himself, Seth. And Seth came to a woman by the name of Jane Roberts. And Jane Roberts was a gifted channel. She had a sensitive nature and was able to pick up through this practice that she would do. She was able to pick up the meeting ground in her higher consciousness with Seth's consciousness. And according to these teachings, Jane, whom Seth calls Rubert, I just find that so hilarious. Jane is Rubert. Because he knew Rubert in another timeline. And so Jane and Seth already had this merger, much like Helen and Jesus, where Helen picks up the communication of Jesus and A Course in Miracles. And if you look in the back of that complete edition and the cameos, Helen agreed to this in a former lifetime. This came through the channeling that she was doing with Jesus, that she had agreed to, at a certain point in the timeline, bring in these higher teachings. And the reason why the Course was brought in, according to these notes of Helen's, was because human beings were slipping. We were supposed to be evolving spiritually more than where we were. And so we needed this speed up, as Jesus calls it in the Course, to redirect us and get us back on track. Seth is doing much the same here. And one of the things that makes the Seth material so enjoyable is that it speaks to us in terms of who we really are and not who we see ourselves currently to be. That we're not the sheep, we're the lions, if we can use that analogy. We're not the frog in the well, we're the frog that belongs living by the great sea. And so Seth is speaking about this higher potential that humanity is now at the cusp of being ready to accept. And before I go into what Seth does say, another thought comes to mind. I don't know if you've ever followed or tuned in to the work of Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick was he was a science fiction writer by trade, but you know many of his movies like Total Recall, Minority Report, many others were put to film. But Philip K. Dick had an experience with what he calls the Christ light on February 2nd and 3rd, 1974. And he said he got hit with a pink light. And that pink light showed him in a flash what was really going on in terms of how this Christ light is kind of colonizing consciousness and bringing us to our full potential. And one of the things that Philip K. Dick said he had a vision of was that he saw two different timelines. And he actually speaks of this in a press conference in France. You can go to YouTube and listen to it. It's fascinating. The girl that or the woman that he was dating at the time was just like this in the audience because she didn't, adhere to these higher ideals or ideas. But what Philip K. Dick said was, in one timeline, all of humanity has actually chosen to be in a police state. And it was total lockdown, total control, global government, global police state. And it was, rule by force and control. And he says in the other timeline, we had avoided that. And we were completely free. And all of those forces that were pushing us towards that surveillance, globalist police state were overcome because we rose above that way of thinking and being within ourselves, and collectively we called in a different version of reality. And that's exactly what the Seth material is basically getting at. That if we remain sheepish and we just follow along and don't question anything, genocide can be live streamed and we won't do anything. In fact, we'll fund it and we'll just allow it to happen. We'll just sheepishly go along with, our ID cards or the chip or whatever else they're planning in this new move with Palantir, all of these things, we can go along with it sheepishly, or we can wake up and say, no, we're not going to just go along with this totalitarian agenda. But in order to do that, you have to find the power within yourself in order to come out of these chains. And that means you have to know yourself more than just the body. Right? Otherwise, as Jesus says in A Course in Miracles, if you're not following the Holy Spirit's curriculum and breaking the chains and removing the blocks, he says we're under a mental tyranny. And that mental tyranny will manifest in the physical reality. Right? So there is sort of a, get off your ass kind of a push right now, spiritually speaking. So Seth says this. This book is Seth's way of demonstrating that human personality is multidimensional, that we exist in many realities at once, that the soul or inner self is not something apart from us, but the very medium in which we exist. He emphasizes that truth is not found by going from teacher to teacher, church to church, or discipline to discipline, but by looking within the self. The intimate knowledge of consciousness, the secrets of the universe, are not esoteric truths to be hidden from the people then. Such information is as natural to man as air, and as available to those who honestly seek it by looking to the source within. So this has been one of the marks of our more modern and postmodern ages, is that these initiatic teachings that were really designed, if you look in the ancient world, for the elite, right? The upper classes were the initiates. If you read Plato's Symposium, you get that very clearly. You have the slave class and you have the master class, slaves and masters. And the masters were the initiates. And, we went through changes culturally, but in all intents and purposes, the masses are still the slaves. We're just debt slaves now, right? We have better apartments and domiciles, and we think we're free. I don't know why I'm on this rant this morning, but the point being, the initiation now is collective. That it's not just for the elites and the aristocrats, it's for everyone. And we realize that everyone is us when we come to this place of true knowing of the self. And that's why he says, when we begin to open up, we realize that we're not imprisoned by anyone. We're not enslaved by anyone except our own belief system, right? Who was the lion enslaved by when he thought he was a sheep? He was simply conditioned to believe that. But he was also easily able to get out of the conditioning if he would be willing to look at himself. That's what Seth is saying. We have to look at the nature of our own being. Who am I? What is the nature of my consciousness? And begin to ask this with the wonder and openness of a child, and be willing to look past what we've been telling ourselves and what others have told ourselves that we are. He says, to the point, my readers may suppose that they are physical creatures, bound within physical bodies, imprisoned within bone, flesh, and skin. If you believe that your existence is dependent upon this corporeal image, then you feel in danger of extinction, for no physical form lasts, and no body, however beautiful in youth, retains the same vigor and enchantment in old age. If you identify with your own youth or beauty or intellect or accomplishments, then there is the constant gnawing knowledge that these attributes can and will vanish. He says, I'm writing this book to ensure you, or to assure you, that this is not the case. Basically, you are no more of a physical being than I am. And I have donned and discarded more bodies than I care to tell. Personalities who do not exist do not write books. I am quite independent of a physical image, and so are you. Consciousness creates form. It's not the other way around. All personalities are not physical. It is only because you are so busily concerned with daily matters that you do not realize that there is a portion of you who knows that its own powers are far superior to those shown by the ordinary self. There's a portion of you that knows. That portion of you gives you the will, the impulse, the desire, the eros to come to these teachings, to seek them out, to learn, to question, to open. So there's a portion of us that already knows we're not physical, we're not bodies. We don and take off bodies like clothes. But who we are is beyond the body, beyond time. That's why he's saying it is up to us then to get out of the enchantment or the hypnotic spell of just staying focused within the five senses. Right? This is going to play out nicely when we open the course this morning, because in that he talks about the experience of going beyond the body. Right? He says we've all had it, right? Because like Seth is telling us, we are no more physical than he is. Right? And so this idea that we've never been out of the body and we don't know what it's like to be in the higher world is silly. Because one of the core teachings of the initiatic philosophies is that we start in the superconscious reality. We are divine beings, and we forget and we fall asleep into matter. And then there's the return. So there's this cycle of involution. We involve ourselves. Spirit involves itself into matter. And then spirit evolves itself out of matter. And there's this cyclic process of descent and ascent that is at the heart of all of these teachings, right? And so what we want to recognize is we've already been this. We've never not been this. We have amnesia. We have forgotten. These teachings are based within a recollection and a return to our natural state. Right? I want to go home is one of the ways that it actually begins to show up when you get this taste. I'm not at home here. There's something missing, right? It's, what Morpheus says to Neo when he's still not awake from the Matrix. It's like a splinter in your mind. Somewhere you know that this isn't reality. And so these teachings come to you when you're ready to acknowledge that splinter, that itch, that willingness to look beyond the norm. And then he says, speaking of himself, I am an energy personality essence, no longer focused in physical matter. As such, I am aware of some truths that many of you seem to have forgotten. I hope to remind you of these. I do not speak so much to the part of you that you think of as yourself, as to that part of you that you do not know, that you have to some extent denied and to some extent forgotten. That part of you reads this book or listens to this book even as you read it. So he's saying that we have made a caricature of ourselves, and this is our sleep, this is our amnesia. We think we're somebody else. We're wearing a mask, but we've become so identified with the role that we're playing, like the actor's mask, that we've forgotten we are a divine being, a light being. And so Seth is saying, I'm actually speaking to that part of you. I'm speaking to the light within you that knows you're not at home, that knows you're a multidimensional being. I speak to those who believe in God and those who do not, to those who believe that science will find all answers as to the nature of reality, and to those who do not. I hope to give you clues that will enable you to study the nature of reality for yourself, as you have never studied it before. There are several things that I shall ask you to understand. Listen now. You are not stuck in time, like a fly in a closed bottle, whose wings are therefore useless. You cannot trust your physical senses to give you a true picture of reality. They are lovely liars. With such a fantastic tale to tell that you believe it without question. You are sometimes wiser, more creative, and far more knowledgeable when you are dreaming than when you are awake. But take a special note of the senses being lovely liars and telling a fantastic tale. And just a couple of more points here. He says most of my readers are familiar with the term muscle bound. He says as a species, you have grown ego bound instead, held in a spiritual rigidity with the intuitive portions of the self either denied or distorted beyond recognition. So ego bound means that we have been cutting ourselves off from our intuitive, deeply feeling centers, right? And so as we're going to sit within a meditation this morning and open up to the cues that Jesus feeds us in the Course, we'll begin to feel that, like he said, we're not trapped within a bottle right now. We just need to get back in touch with these deeper intuitive feelings of knowing how to make our return to this place that we've never left, our own divine light and being. This is what these teachings are designed to do. As he'll say in the Course, the second coming is not a space-time event. He says the second coming is a return of sense. And the sense he's talking about is this heightened, intuitive knowing that allows you to ascend and remember and recollect who you really are, to come out of your amnesia. And lastly here, there are no limitations to the self. There are no limitations to its potentials. You can adopt artificial limitations through your own ignorance, however. You can identify, for example, with your outer ego alone and cut yourself off from abilities that are a part of you. You can deny, but you cannot change the facts. The personality is multidimensional, even though many people hide their heads, figuratively speaking, in the sand of three-dimensional existence and pretend there's nothing more. And then lastly here, the ego is a jealous God because it wants, the ego is a jealous God and it wants its interests served. It does not want to admit the reality of any dimensions except those within which it feels comfortable and can understand. It was meant to be an aid, but it has been allowed to become a tyrant. Right? So this acquiescence to the ego belief system, which keeps us stuck and identified with the physical body and the five physical senses, we've actually fallen into this willingness to play the role within a lie. And so as Seth will point out, as many others do, the nature of reality is holographic. So whatever you've done to yourself internally, you'll see the world reflecting that back to yourself. So what we said earlier about a tyranny and a police state and all of those things, that's actually an outpicturing of an inner condition. When we've given complete license to the ego as our identity manufacturer, we have also given that nod to tyranny. And so in one way or another, we're going to see that idea take form on the collective level. So we want to recognize, that's what I said, the way out is in. We have to first remove the plank within our own eye, and that is our own acquiescence to this inner tyranny of ego identification. Now, as Seth had said, the ego is a jealous God. And so it's a gatekeeper, and it doesn't want us to find this way in. That's why in our class on Tuesday nights, Joel Goldsmith will say, you have to have more than just this casual desire to want to wake up, to want to go home, to want to return to God. It must become a burning, erotic passion. As it says in Zen, you're going to have to want this as one whose head is held under water wants air. That's what it's going to take for us to make that orbital leap from identification with the body identity, which is this well-worn groove within the energetic matrix of our consciousness. We're going to have to literally quantum leap to another orbital level within our consciousness. Now, if you know anything about physics, I know very, very little, electrons will leap from orbit to orbit when more energy is brought into the system. So that's exactly what these teachings are doing. They're bringing more energy into your system so that your focal point of consciousness can get out of the well-worn rut of being identified within the body in the chains of the cave of the lower ego. And you'll leap into a new perception of yourself and your world, and a new timeline will be experienced in the collective. This is again what Philip K. Dick was talking about when he got shot with the Logos, right? The Christ light. If you want a really wild ride about Philip K. Dick's experience, his semi-autobiographical book, Valis, which is an acronym, Vast Active Living Intelligence System. And it's all about this rebirth of the Christ within humanity. It's really an amazing book, but not for the average reader. So let's just prepare a little bit here by settling into the breath, allowing what we've heard to go into a deeper place within us, allowing that part of the mind that Seth was just saying he speaks to come to the fore in your awareness. This is your divine nature that knows what to do with all of this information. So there is an opening, a surrendering, and an allowing of this deeper part of ourself to surface. Just find your breath, relax. And just listen to a few quotes and poems as you get into a more meditative space. This is a direct quote from Socrates where he says, "The mind's sight becomes sharp only when the body's eyes go past their prime." So that's an invitation to open our inner eye, or the mind's eye, as you listen and take in the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore. I came out alone on my way to my tryst, but who is this that follows me in the silent dark? I move aside to avoid his presence, but escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word that I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. Those who are near to me do not know that you are nearer to me than they are. Those who speak to me do not know that my heart is full with your unspoken words. Those who crowd in my path do not know that I am walking alone with you. Those who love me do not know that their love brings you to my heart. In some words from the Course, everyone has experienced what he would call a sense of being transported beyond himself. This feeling of liberation far exceeds the dream of freedom sometimes experienced in the special love relationship. It is a sense of actual escape from limitations. If you will consider what this transportation really entails, you will realize that it is a sudden unawareness of the body and a joining of yourself and something else, in which your mind enlarges to encompass it. It becomes part of you as you unite with it, and both become whole, as neither is perceived as separate. What really happens is that you have given up the illusion of a limited awareness and lost your fear of union. The love that instantly replaces it extends to what has freed you and unites you with it. And while this lasts, you are not uncertain of your identity and would not limit it. You have escaped from fear to peace. asking no questions of reality, but merely accepting it. You have accepted this instead of the body, and have let yourself be one with something beyond it, simply by not letting your mind be limited by the body. There is no violence at all in this escape. The body is not attacked, but merely properly perceived. It does not limit you, because you would not have it so. You are not really lifted out of it. It cannot contain you. You go where you would be, gaining, not losing, a sense of self. In these instants of release from physical restrictions, you experience much of what happens in the holy instant. The lifting of the barriers of time and space, the sudden experience of peace and joy, and above all, the lack of awareness of the body and of the questioning whether or not all this is possible. It is possible because you want it. The sudden expansion of the self that takes place with your desire for it is the irresistible appeal the holy instant holds. It calls to you to be yourself within its safe embrace. There are the laws of limit lifted for you, to welcome you to openness of mind and freedom. Come to this place of refuge where you can be yourself in peace, not through destruction, not through a breaking out, but merely by a quiet melting in. For peace will join you there, simply because you have been willing to let go the limits you have placed on love and joined it where it is and where it led you in answer to its gentle call to be at peace. if it feels right, just remain abiding in this mask-off moment. No past, no future, no body. Just keep melting in. And you'll come to that great ocean within the center of the heart. This ocean of bliss. This ocean of love. And all of the great beings that have taught this throughout the millennia are here to greet us as we truly are. Our minds expand to encompass this ocean and join with it. And we feel the dissolving of all separate states. Just this presence. Blue bag will go around. And if you're joining on Facebook or YouTube, you can simply click the link below and donate and support the 8 a.m. service here at Unity. We thank you for that. We bless the offering with the intent that whatever form it takes the form of a memory for us to come back to true wisdom and true love. And so it is. Amen. Okay, let's seal the deal. Staying within the center of the heart, this place of pure peace and intuitive knowing and witnessing of our divine nature, moment to moment, which is the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen.